The technology in Subnautica makes it surprisingly easy to survive on an alien planet. You have a fabricator that can reconstruct anything as long as you have the necessary materials, and a handheld construction company that can turn clumps of titanium into an overpriced studio apartment with an oceanfront view. But given the scenario presented in Subnautica, could someone realistically survive if provided with modern technology? We're going to start the scenario assuming you've crash landed on the Subnautica planet 4546b. As there's no current protocols for what equipment would be provided in emergency scenarios for trips to aquatic planets, we're going to go off the required life raft equipment under FAA rules for extended overwater operations. This means we're going to have the following: one survivor locator light, a pyrotechnic signaling device, i.e. flares, a canopy or some kind of shelter, a radar reflector, a life raft repair kit, a bailing bucket, signaling mirror, a raft knife, a CO2 bottle for emergency inflation, an inflation pump, 2 oars, a retaining line, magnetic compass, a flashlight with batteries, emergency food rations, a water supply roughly 2 pints per person, a fishing kit, and a whistle. As these rafts come in varying sizes for the number of people they can support, we are going to go off the assumption we have a 10-person life raft, in which case we have about 10 times the standard supplies. This will give us roughly 20 days of supplies to survive, eating at 1,000 calories and drinking 2 pints of water a day. All of Subnautica takes place in a crater with a 3-kilometer radius, with each of the possible starting zones being roughly at the center in the safe shallows. Our first objective would be finding ways to prolong our food and water supplies. Luckily, the PDA confirmed some helpful information that should allow us to get a semi-permanent freshwater supply. When scanning a bladderfish, the PDA's assessment states not only is it edible, but its membrane has applications as a natural water filter. This means that hypothetically, the membranes of caught bladderfish could be fashioned into water filters, giving us an extension on our limited water supply. Well, then that solves our issue now. As long as we have a means of fishing, we could survive indefinitely on a raft in the safe shallows, right? Well, no. The main catalyst that starts off the Subnautica story is that the planet 4546b is actually under a quarantine, with a giant alien ray gun that shoots down anything attempting to land on or leave the planet. The specific disease, the Corarbacterium, is explained to be a waterborne bacteria that is capable of entering the body through the skin. It's also noted that it has an incubation period of 2 weeks and an incredibly high rate of lethality, which makes coming into contact with the water and anything that lives in the water extremely risky. As we're trying to see if we could survive Subnautica with modern technology, we are going to imagine that we are aware of this fact. Otherwise, this would be impossible. As a result, this rules out eating raw fish and using raw air bladder membranes as water filters. This also means getting into the water without some form of hazmat suit would basically guarantee infection, meaning we're stuck on our raft. While it's not present in the base Subnautica game, we can see that in Subnautica Below Zero there is rain and snow, meaning we could at least collect rainwater using our canopy and bailing bucket. Additionally, one of the first creatures we encounter in Subnautica doesn't actually interact with the ocean at all: the sky ray. These bird-like creatures can be seen landing on the life pod throughout the game, and interestingly enough, the PDA confirms that they not only have a largely sea-based diet, but they've also not been observed diving for food. Also, as a side note, if they actually touch water, they die immediately, but I think that's just the game trying to prevent them from flying underwater. Additionally, they're one of the few creatures in the game that doesn't actually have a model for the Corarbacteria infection, meaning the likelihood that you would be infected by eating one of these is substantially lower than raw fish. This finally gives us a starting point on potentially surviving past our basic supplies. We're utilizing some of our food rations as bait. We could survive on raw sky rays and collect rainwater on the raft for a period of time. While this is a good start, we would still be at risk of running into some of the protruding coral in the safe shallows, or considering the water on the planet is essentially poison, any large waves that would come into contact with us could potentially be lethal. We will ultimately need to get to dry land. Luckily for us, considering the radius of the crater is only 3 kilometers at sea level, the average person can actually see 4.8 kilometers. This means we would easily be able to see the 2 islands in the crater. The only question is which one. We have the lush, plant-covered floater island, or a mountain surrounded by leviathans with a giant alien railgun on it. The answer is pretty obvious. With the key to the front door of the railgun left outside, we could actually use the interior as a base of operation. Okay, no, we're gonna go to the floater island. With the ore provided in the raft, as long as we're careful, we should be able to safely get to the floater island without getting any water on us. Additionally, the path to the floater island from the safe shallows is relatively safe, with stalkers being the only aggressive animal that would be living somewhat close to the surface that may attempt to attack the raft. However, even after making it to the island, things don't become smooth sailing from here. Despite the vegetation on the floater island, there's actually a stunning lack of edible food, and considering that we are only utilizing modern technology, none of the abandoned bases or grow beds would be present, meaning we wouldn't have access to the potatoes or the marble melons. This means the only renewable food source are the 4 lantern trees. We are lucky enough though that the island does at least have our tried and true source of food, sky rays, but we're also left with new problems. The island is also inhabited by cave crawlers, who can live both on land and underwater, and that means they can also be infected with Karar. This means that even though we're no longer on the raft, we still have a risk of catching the bacterium, and that's if the cave crawlers don't kill you first. At least with our raft knife, we should hopefully be able to defend ourselves, but this means we're never going to be truly safe. Now that we know what is on the island, we can start to see how we would survive longer term. Along with the raft canopy, we could utilize the large bulbo tree leaves for collecting rainwater. We would also be able to build traps using seeds from the trees to catch sky rays that are living on the island. And with the amount of trees on the island, we would actually be able to start a fire and cook the meat that we've been eating, which means we would actually be able to start eating the food that we would catch with the fishing kit. So while we got our meat covered, we do have to look at the lantern trees. While it only takes 12 minutes for a lantern tree to grow in Subnautica, which is about half a day in game, that's only slightly unrealistic. So even assuming the grow time would be akin to the fastest growing fruit bearing trees on Earth, it would take roughly 2 years to eventually grow more lantern trees. But at the end of the day, you could survive. You would need to constantly watch your back at the risk of the cave crawlers and live on basically an exclusively carnivore diet of cooked fish and sky rays, and maybe occasionally have a lantern fruit. But considering that the deepest any diver has dived was 253 meters, and this actually left the guy in a coma for 7 days, without any means to build a submarine, there would be no way to get down to the Sea Emperor in order to hatch the eggs. This means no cure, and so even assuming if you had a rocket, you would just get shot down by the precursor cannon. So while you could survive, you would ultimately live out the rest of your days stranded on an island, all alone. Wait a second. If there's carbon-based life that is as advanced as the animals we see in Subnautica, that means that there's at least millions of years of evolution that had to occur for them to get to that point. If there was millions of years worth of biomass that existed on the planet, that would also mean that there's oil. With the full power of the US military, evading the singular precursor cannon would be a breeze. And after that, a quick trip down to the Sea Emperor to crack open the eggs would mean Karar would be dealt with in an afternoon. All that would be left is to enjoy the McDonald's that would inevitably be opened on Floater Island.